What up? It's Dramos. On tonight's show, we'll have New York City Congressman Ritchie Torres joining us via Zoom. We'll talk entanglements, Kanye's short-lived presidential run, Donald Trump trying to sell off Puerto Rico, and is Wayfair a front for human trafficking? Let's talk about it. It's what the world needs now. What the world needs now, the first ever late night show for the people by the people. As per usual, man, before we get into anything though, let's put some positivity in the air. So today's quote comes to us from Napoleon Hill. He is the author of Think and Grow Rich. The quote is, "The number one reason people fail in life is because they listen to their friends, family, and neighbors." And I absolutely love this quote because it's just so true. I think a lot of us end up becoming scared to do things. We doubt our abilities because we allow other people to influence us. And not to say you can't take people's advice, but you have to take it with a grain of salt because unfortunately, people are just projecting their own fears, their own experiences, and their own doubts in themselves onto you. So if they feel like they can't accomplish something, why would they think that you can do so? And they don't know you. They don't know your drive, your hunger, your tenacity, where your head is at. So you just have to keep those things in mind, when you're reaching out to others, and also when people just give you advice on what they think you should be doing. At the end of the day, I think you and your gut know what you should be chasing after, and that's it. Listen to your own gut. With that said, though, man, let's talk. Let's get into some messy stuff right now. Let's talk entanglement. Obviously, we all saw the story of August Alsina, his interview with Angela Yee. It made its rounds talking about his, what he called a relationship with Jada Pinkett Smith. At first, the Smiths denied that it ever happened. And then they came to Red Table Talk. Jada had to bring herself to the Red Table, I should say. Will was there as well. It looked like he definitely didn't want to be there. He looked like he was dragged there kicking and screaming. And it was just awkward. So now everybody is talking about entanglement. That's like the new meme word that we're all looking at. There's been a ton of different Jada Pinkett Smith memes going on all over the place. She said she just didn't want to admit she smashed. Yeah, it definitely was definitely weird for her to be there at the Red Table and putting it all out there. It seemed like she was also trying to kind of push some of the blame away from it. And also what's super interesting about it is that she's also kind of almost become like this villain, I feel like, for a lot of people. A lot of people kind of feel like, well, with her age, she was double his age at the time. He also came to them for help, as far as his mental and physical well-being. He just wasn't in a good place. And a lot of people feel like she took advantage of that. Her and Will, they finally kind of came out and said that at that point they were separated, so they were going through their own stuff. They were thinking that they were going to be getting a divorce. And she, and I quote, said, "I wanted to feel good." So she pulled a Halle Berry and Monsters Ball on that one. And a lot of people are kind of pissed at her for that because they feel like she really did take advantage of this young kid. And bro, there's like a ton of really awkward moments. Will Smith definitely looked like he'd been crying all day. He was super just anxious and fidgety the entire thing, as I think anybody else would be, talking about some crazy shit like that the entire time. Joe Paul, you said she rocked the cradle. And it was just a lot of weird, awkward moments. At one point, Will says he's going to get her back. And then she's just kind of awkwardly laughs and well, I think you got me back enough. And they both laugh. And then they end it basically saying, "Bad marriage for life," playing off of the whole Bad Boys theme. It was just fucking odd. The whole thing was weird, uncomfortable. And I don't know. I think this is a lesson that really shows you don't know what the fuck is happening in people's lives. I think on the surface, we all picture Jada and Will to be this whole perfect couple and this whole perfect relationship and relationship goals and all that kind of stuff. And it's nah, they're fucked up just like the rest of us. And yeah, this was just a whole weird, painful situation. I genuinely feel bad for Will to have to sit there publicly and just face this once again, and just for the sake of, saving his wife's face, I guess at this point. She looked terrible amidst this whole thing. I don't know. It was just super painful to watch. I remember after watching the 12 minutes of it, just being what the fuck did I just sit down and watch it? It made me feel uncomfortable. So I don't know. Just definitely an odd kind of situation. So just weird, awkward entanglements aside, let's talk about some good news right now. So on the good side of things, we had talked about this last week. Kanye announcing his presidential run. It was basically now grand opening, grand closing. He has announced this week, not personally, but his team has announced that he is out of the race. And what's crazy about this whole thing is that he actually even went as far as to put together a team to try to get him the signatures required to get on the ballot in states like Florida and South Carolina. He even had a team of, I think it was like 180 people out there, like collecting signatures. Ice Muse, you said that was fast. Yeah, it just was absolutely ridiculous. Miss Boo Boo, you said he made himself look like a joke. Absolutely. I mean, and if you didn't realize that it was a joke prior to, I don't know what world we're living in. That's the scary part about this, because you move on to it, and they actually had done some like voter polling numbers, and he actually got 2% of the voters that they polled said that they would vote for him. He even beat out like legitimate politicians running within actual like campaign parties like the Libertarian Party or the Green Party. He was polling higher than those people. That's what actually is the scary part about this whole thing, because had this have gone on for longer, who knows how he would have sort of swayed the jury in such an important election year. And you even had, people like really going to bat for him and putting their own reputations on the line. You had Chance the Rapper jumping off the deep end when it came to his tweets. And even one of my favorite tweets that he put out, and it was like a serious question he had, was, why vote for Joe Biden over Kanye West? Like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, I can't believe we live in a world in 2020 right now where we are asking that question, where there are people who genuinely believe that is a valid question. When with somebody like Kanye West, how would we choose to vote for Biden over crazy Kanye? I don't know. It's just absolutely fucking wild to even think about. Some people didn't even think that he was actually serious about it, which is actually the sad part when it comes to all this stuff. Ice Muse, you said celebrity status in America holds a huge amount of influence, unfortunately. Yeah, that's the sad part about it. I would have hoped that a lot of people would have maybe learned their lesson when they, as they see the world we're living in right now, with, as Charlamagne says, our celebrity in chief, Donald Trump. It's just absolutely crazy to think that this was even a serious, consideration for some people. And speaking of our celebrity in chief, let's get into the bad. So this one obviously hits close to home for myself, so I wanted to make sure that I spoke on it. So over the weekend, news broke that allegedly Donald Trump wanted to sell Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria devastated the island in 2017. So this was broken by the New York Times. Former Homeland Security Secretary Elaine Duke, she broke the story. And what's crazy about this, and it's wild that we're even surprised by the actions of this guy at this point, but he just keeps finding ways to top himself and to showcase the type of person that he is. So amidst a time when American lives have been lost and mass destruction of a part of America has occurred, because yes, Puerto Rico is a part of the United States and the people of that island are American citizens, his first instinct is to sell them off like a piece of property rather than helping American citizens who are suffering. It's just absolutely crazy. And even just looking beyond that, I mean, it was already egregious the way that he responded to this whole hurricane. He dragged his feet on releasing disaster relief funds that were allocated for this, and didn't even end up putting as much money out there as he claims he did. And listen, to be fair, because I know a lot of people be like, well, the Puerto Rican government did some shady shit too. Absolutely. There was the previous administration in Puerto Rico definitely mishandled a lot of things. There were, some shady things going on when it came to some of the government contracts that came when they were writing things as far as putting out money and hiring companies to help repair the island. There's definitely some questionable things that happened when it came to that, and some of these companies maybe not deserving the bid to take on something this massive. But to be honest, that's something we're actually seeing right now. I'm not sure how many people have been up on this, but it's been breaking over the last few hours, last day or so. They're talking about several states are actually doing investigations right now about possible fraud when it comes to federal contracts with companies that were supposed to be making PPE and ventilators amidst the COVID outbreak. So it's something that happened here in the mainland U.S. as well. Does that mean that these people do not deserve to get the aid and relief to help save their lives and to help save the lives that they've built for themselves? Absolutely not. You don't punish people for the faults of their local government. That's why we have a federal government to step in and make sure they take charge and hold people accountable. Joe Paul, you said he's a real estate developer, for Christ's sake. Why do people think he would be a good president? I agree 100%, man. Love We Don't See, you said, look what we did with bailing out all those corporations and gave the people $1,200 check, $1,200 check. Absolutely. It's disgusting. And it's just appalling. And I keep saying it's like we shouldn't be surprised by these actions, but somehow, some way, this man keeps finding ways to top himself. And I had touched on my Instagram talking about the CEO of Goya and my thoughts, and you had a lot of Trump supporters saying, that how could you judge this company or judge the CEO based upon his support of Trump? Well, what's crazy to me is how is it that Trump supporters find it so hard to understand that when you choose to support a man that continues to show you that he values money over people, and in this case specifically money over American lives, how do you have like an issue understanding why we have a problem with you supporting him? It's absolutely, it's disgusting, and it's inhumane. I don't know how else to put it. So terrible things obviously are going on in this world. And this one is like a combination of just terrible and odd. And it leads me into this week's big question. So I did a poll about this on my Instagram, and it's kind of crazy to see the different sides and how many people really believe in this and question it. And rightfully so. A lot of people bring up good points, but I wanted to get your guys' take on Wayfair. So the internet has been swirling when it comes to Wayfair and these accusations of human trafficking. And I gotta admit, at first for me, I'm always like very skeptical when it comes to conspiracy theories like this, especially like a big brand like this. It just doesn't seem fathomable to think that they would dip their toe in something as crazy as this. But I have to admit, the evidence is kind of compelling, and it is very strange, at the very minimum, a very strange, set of coincidences. So rumor that Wayfair is involved in human trafficking is based off of these high-priced storage cabinets that happen to share the name of multiple missing teens. Now, the price on these cabinets, again, is something that's weird when it comes to them ranging from $10,000 to $14,000. Now, of course, Wayfair is denying this whole thing. They're claiming it's a lie and that the cabinets are industrial strength, therefore accurately priced. But it keeps just getting weirder, and this is actually the fault of Wayfair, because they now have taken down those cabinets from the website. And this was their statement when it came to why they took those things down. And I quote, "They removed the products to rename them and to provide more in-depth description and photos that accurately depict the product to clarify the price points." That seems weird. Like, if you really got nothing to hide when it comes to this whole thing, why take it down? Just be like, yo, you guys are fucking idiots. These things are worth $10,000 to $14,000. Buy one if you're that curious and see what happens. But it is that fact that they decided to take it down that I think is one of the more compelling arguments for me. So I'm curious, what do you guys think? Like, what is the general consensus out there? So Jay, so you said, so they take a kid out of the cabinet. I'm not sure how it works, to be honest with you. Tiana, you said someone rich should buy one and see if it's real. Exactly, like Drake. Like, Drake, we need you at a time like this. Like, buy a couple of these cabinets and just see what happens. Like, buy them under a couple false names and, like, send them to some random places. And, like, if a kid shows up instead of a cabinet, then we know Wayfair is on some really wild shit right now. Kurt Carr, you said you want 2020 to leave you alone. Every day it's newer and crazier shit. Exactly. That's what's why, like, it feels like that, and that's what, like, I'm like, I don't know how much I can believe, because the internet might just keep wanting to stir the pot at this point, to keep giving us memes to look at and all this other shit. But man, it's fucking weird. You said, and what is the site linked to the SKU numbers? How is that site even up? I can't remember the name of the site. Yeah, I read about that, talking about there was some sort of a link to like a Russian company, a Russian website, and the SKU numbers somehow matched up to that. I have to dive deeper into that because obviously that just keeps adding to the fucking weirdness of this whole entire situation. But what do you guys think? Like, I was very surprised by the number of people that when I posted my poll were actually saying, yes, I believe this wholeheartedly, and actually DM me saying like, man, it's too weird to not be true. All these different things. So I want to get your guys' opinion for this week's big question. Jade, you said rumors are rooted in some type of truth since forever. Okay, that's super interesting. Coach Queen, you said at this point you don't put anything past anybody. All right. I mean, it is super interesting. I mean, all the shit that we've seen, all the crazy human trafficking stories, like these rings that we're hearing about and kids that are missing that we didn't even kind of realize, like it is a bigger issue than I think a lot of people think. So I don't know. It's just definitely weird. Tiana, you said you need some more evidence. Okay. Kiss the Dragon, you said like, what's the protocol to buying a cabinet from there? I mean, I've purchased something on Wayfair. It was a pretty simple thing. I mean, granted, it wasn't a $10,000 cabinet, but I would also argue like, how do they differentiate it if you're like a cop or you're like actually a pedophile? You know what I mean? Like, what do they refund you the money if they figure out that you're not like a pedophile? How do you accredit a pedophile and know that? I don't know. It's just a weird kind of thing. Ice Mees, you said, did I see the girl that said she wasn't missing? I didn't see that. You see, that's the other thing. And this is like my whole argument when it comes to the internet. People can just post whatever the fuck they want. I can make a tweet claiming literally anything that I want, that if you eat dog shit, it prevents you from getting the coronavirus. And somebody out there is going to believe it, want to retweet it. We get enough retweets behind it. People are going to start talking about it as if it's true. It's just absolutely wild. I mean, Kiss the Dragon says like a secret word or code. It just seems like the product is up there for 10 grand. If you got 10 G's to burn, you can do it. I don't know. It's just a crazy fucking world we live in. I think that's the more of the story. But I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in, my live digital audience. We always do this, obviously, every Wednesday at noon. I record it, so thank y'all so much. My guest tonight will be Ritchie Torres. He is running for Congress in New York City, so he'll be joining me. I'm very excited to talk to him, so that'll be our guest for tonight on the show. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate you, and let's get into it. All right, my guest tonight has been declared the face of the future by the Daily News. He's a candidate for Congress in New York's District 15. Ritchie Torres, thanks so much for joining us tonight, man.
It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. So listen, I mean, first and foremost, how are you? Obviously, these last couple months have been crazy for anybody, but now running a campaign amidst all this, how you been?
Look, after nearly 2 years of campaigning, I feel more exhausted than excited. I ran in the craziest possible race at the craziest possible moment. Mm-hmm. So I was running for Congress in the South Bronx.
Yep.
The election unfolded against the backdrop of COVID-19. And at one point, I contracted COVID-19 myself.
Wow.
So I never imagined running for public office under these circumstances. It was the most fiercely contested primary in New York City. There were 12 candidates, including 5 elected officials. And the front runner was a man by the name of Ruben Diaz Sr., who is known to be a Trump Republican masquerading as a Democrat. He's the most anti-LGBTQ, anti-choice Democrat in New York City politics. And there was a real risk that a Trump Republican could win the most Democratic district in America. And many pundits said this race could not be won. Ruben Diaz Sr. could not be beaten. But with support from everyday people on the ground in the South Bronx, against all odds, we managed to defeat Ruben Diaz Sr. by a margin of 2-1, ushering in a new generation of leadership. And he announced his retirement. So the politics of hate and fear in the Bronx have been defeated.
Amazing. And listen, congratulations, first of all. That's absolutely incredible. I mean, the whole ride, that whole story right there is super inspiring. And speaking of, I mean, you're a young guy, you're a dude from the Bronx. Talk to me about how the hell you got into politics and why you got into politics.
The starting point is lived experience. You know, I grew up in poverty in almost all my life in the Bronx. I was raised by a single mother who had to raise 3 children on minimum wage, which in the 1990s was $4.25. You know, I've had family members in the criminal justice system. I've struggled with substance abuse and depression. So the struggles of the South Bronx are not an abstraction to me. These are struggles that I've lived in my own life. My greatest passion is public housing, affordable housing. when you live in public housing, you know what it's like to be left behind by the federal government. Public housing has been so savagely defunded that it has $40 billion worth of capital needs. So you have asthmatics who are struggling to breathe in their own apartments because of molded conditions. You have senior citizens who live without heat and hot water during the winter. You have disabled residents who've been stranded in top floor apartments because of broken elevators. You have children who've been poisoned by lead. And the consequences of lead poisoning can haunt you for the rest of your life. That is the impact of federal disinvestment from low-income communities of color. I grew up in a public housing development right across the street from Trump Golf Course. And while I saw the conditions in my own home get worse, the government was investing more than $100 million in a golf course for Donald Trump. And I remember wondering to myself at the time, what does it say about our society that we're willing to invest more in a golf course than in the homes of low-income New Yorkers? And then I said to myself, rather than complain about it and stand by passively, why not become the change I wish to see in the world? Why not become a housing organizer? And at age 24, with a background in tenant organizing, I ran for public office. I was poor, on food stamps, openly gay, had no ties to the party machine, no ties to the dynasties of Bronx politics. But I knocked on thousands of doors. I went into people's homes. I heard their stories. And I won my first campaign on the strength of door-to-door, face-to-face campaigning, becoming the first openly LGBTQ elected official in the Bronx. That was in 2013. But 7 years before then, I had dropped out of college. I was struggling with depression, abusing substances. I thought of taking my own life. I felt as if the world around me had collapsed. And then 7 years later, I became the youngest elected official in the largest city in the United States. And now I'm the presumptive Democratic nominee for New York 15 in the South Bronx. My story is the story of the Bronx. It's a story of struggle, but it's also a story of overcoming.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. I think that's great to hear because we need more people like yourself from the community, more youth, and seeing that there's a possibility to really make change as long as you invest, your time and energy in the right places. And your story hits specifically close to home for me because my mother was a principal in the South Bronx. These kids deserve better. These people deserve better. And it's amazing to see somebody like yourself out there, on the front lines fighting for that. So first and foremost, man, I salute you and I thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And look, we need, a wise person once said, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're probably going to be on the menu. Right? And we need young public servants of color from places like the South Bronx to have a seat at the table. We need Congress to be every bit as diverse as America itself.
Yeah, and I love that perspective. And I do want to kind of talk about, obviously we're talking about representation is very important. But I am also curious when it comes to the media. Does it bother you that a lot of times the media feels the need to say, he's the first openly gay person running. He's the first Afro-Latino, whatever you want to, those different words, instead of it just being like, this is Ritchie Torres and this is what he stands upon. I'm just curious from your perspective.
Look, it's a good question. And, I've actually had a conversation with this about with Mondale Jones. So the two of us are set to be the first openly gay Black members of Congress in the United States. And he was expressing the same frustration that's implicit in your question. And what I said to him is, look, in the beginning, much of the media coverage is going to be biographical. It's going to be centered around who you are. But over time, as you establish yourself in Congress, the coverage is going to shift to what you've accomplished, to what you've done. So I do not mind the coverage, because my identity is an essential element of who I am. My identity as a Latino, as a Black man, as a gay man, as a son of the Bronx, shapes my perspective on the world. Right? It motivates me to champion the causes that matter most to my community. But at the same time, I know that once I'm in Congress, fighting for the things that matter, health and housing, schools and jobs, that the coverage is going to shift to what I've accomplished, to what I'm fighting for. So I play the long game.
Yeah, no, I definitely love that perspective. I think it also it opens the doors for other kids that grew up like you too, you know, and I think that's the more important thing, you know. And just speaking of heritage, obviously over this past weekend we heard a lot about Donald Trump allegedly talking about wanting to sell Puerto Rico amidst the atrocity that was Hurricane Maria. And I did read your article in the Daily News talking about you know, statehood for Puerto Rico. Now, to be honest, for me personally, I'm not sure if I'm there yet where I believe statehood is the answer. I'm on the fence, but I do want to kind of hear a little bit more about your perspective and why you think that that's the right answer.
So I have complicated thoughts, but here, you know, here's my perspective. You know, when Donald Trump mused about selling Puerto Rico, he spoke as though the island were an imperial possession of the United States, the American empire.
Right.
And as shocking as his comments might seem, Donald Trump did reveal a tragic truth that Puerto Rico is in fact a colony of the United States. You know, we refer to Puerto Rico as a commonwealth, but the term commonwealth is nothing more than a euphemism for colonialism. You know, and we're living in an age of racial enlightenment, when Black Lives Matters has become the rallying cry of a racially awakened nation. And we have to view the struggle of Puerto Rico through the prism of historical racism, right? The Supreme Court that gave us Plessy versus Ferguson and the doctrine of separate but equal, which is a pillar of Jim Crow, was the same exact Supreme Court that relegated Puerto Rico to the status of a colony, right? So it must be known that the colonial status of Puerto Rico is literally a legacy handed down to us by the architects of Jim Crow. It's an expression of systemic racism. And that's why we have to fight the colonization of Puerto Rico. The colonization of Puerto Rico, the disenfranchisement of Puerto Ricans themselves is a deep rot at the heart of American democracy. Like, how can the United States claim to be fully democratic when it denies equal representation, an equal vote, and an equal voice to 3 million American citizens? Puerto Ricans are American citizens.
Absolutely.
How can it claim to be fully democratic when it replaces the popularly elected government of Puerto Rico with a financial control board full of Washington insiders who are neither accountable to nor representative of the people on the island? Like, that is not democracy, that is colonialism, right? Exercising control over the future of a people without granting them the right to vote is the essence of colonialism. But one more point, if I can.
Sure.
Ultimately, process is more important than substance. The process of self-determination is what matters. And Congress should codify the will of the people on the island, no matter what it may be. So if the people vote overwhelmingly for independence, then Congress should codify independence. If the people vote overwhelmingly for statehood, Congress should codify statehood.
That's a good point. That's definitely very interesting. And
I want to be clear. Like, I'm not saying statehood is a magic solution.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But it's you know, but is it better to have 2 U.S. senators than to have none at all?
Right.
I think so. Is it better to vote for the president of the United States than to have no representation at all? I think so.
Yeah.
But my ultimate position is let the people decide, and we should do whatever the people decide.
So, I mean, as we wrap things up, man, so you're obviously, as it looks right now, you're going to be walking out there the victor in this campaign. What are some of kind of your first plans of actions that you really want to kind of get your hands on and start moving forward with?
Look, you know, we often speak of American exceptionalism, but the truth is America is exceptionally cruel toward its own people. We're the only wealthy nation in the world that fails to have a comprehensive social safety net, that fails to provide universal education, universal health care, universal paid time in the workplace. And so the highest priority of Congress should be to create a genuinely comprehensive social safety net that establishes both health and housing as human rights. Like, the greatest challenge we face as a country, I think, is the affordability crisis. Right? The crushing cost of housing, healthcare, higher education. More than half the residents in the South Bronx pay more than half their income toward their rent. You have residents who live in fear of eviction and displacement, especially during the outbreak of COVID-19. We have to ensure that every American in need has access to housing vouchers, which would ensure their rent is no more than 30% of their income.
Yeah.
We need to ensure that the housing we're creating is actually genuinely affordable to the poorest New Yorkers, and we need universal healthcare. Right? Healthcare is a human right. We all have a right to quality, affordable healthcare. And the problem with American healthcare is the organizing principle of American healthcare is neither health nor care, it's money. The system has been corrupted by money.
Yeah.
Like, we have a system that is so corrupted by money that it is more profitable for a surgeon to amputate a diabetic than to treat the diabetes or prevent it from developing in the first place. That is a broken system that needs fundamental restructuring.
Well, Ritchie, thank you so much for giving me your time. Congratulations once again, man. You're an inspiration. And I really think that, people being able to see this, kids, and being able to see somebody like yourself doing this, it really is going to start opening the doors for the change that we want to see. Where can people follow you, your website, keep up with you, and support you?
Torres.nyc is my website. I have a Twitter feed, an Instagram. Feel free to reach out to me. We're always looking for feedback from people on the ground. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Ritchie, take care. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
As we get into tonight's final words, I just want to quickly say thank you once again to Congressman Ritchie Torres for taking the time out of his schedule to be with us tonight and also to just share his story. And my thoughts tonight are very much inspired by his story. I love hearing about his come up, how unlikely of a rise to stardom he's had when it comes to his career in politics. You're talking about a guy who grew up in poverty in the South Bronx, a person of color, a member of the LGBTQ community, growing up during a time when it wasn't as accepted as it is right now. And also him talking about his problems and difficulties dealing with mental health and depression and even wanting to commit suicide. I think let this be a testament to it's never too late to turn your life around. And let this be an inspiration that regardless of the circumstances that you find yourself in, regardless of the life that you were born into, that doesn't mean that you can't be destined for greatness. That doesn't mean that if you have a big goal, a big dream, that you can't achieve it. Obviously, it's going to come with its own set of obstacles. But do not allow the things that you're born into to be the things that seal your fate for the rest of time. You can change the course of your life and the course overall of what your legacy will be. You don't have to keep making the same mistakes that the generations before you have made. You can be the change you want to see, and you have to be the change that you want to see. With that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in once again to this week's episode and your continued support of this show. As per usual, my final little thoughts here will be, remember, it doesn't have to be lonely at the top. I'll see y'all next week.